You're watching Reality Check. In the months that followed the abrogation of Article 370 and the stripping of Jammu and Kashmir's statehood, the government and the BJP targeted Kashmir's mainstream political leaders, derisively calling them Gupkar Gang. Many of them were jailed in their homes or elsewhere, where they stayed for months, despite domestic and international criticism. Then, in a sudden U-turn, without any explanation, the Prime Minister invited those same leaders for a marathon 3.5-hour meeting today in New Delhi at his residence. Consider this image, one of the many released of the meeting, where one can see the Prime Minister and the Home Minister standing next to the mainstream leaders, jailed by their very own government. Mehbooba Mufti, former Chief Minister in custody for 14 months. Omar Abdullah, another former Chief Minister in custody for 7 months. Farooq Abdullah, another former Chief Minister who was also in custody for several months. It appears, though, broadly at the meeting that the Prime Minister tried to break some of the bad faith and spoke of the need for early elections. Remember, Jammu and Kashmir has been under President's rule now for close to 3 years. For completing the process of redrawing constituency boundaries, and most significantly, that his government was committed to restoring Jammu and Kashmir's statehood at the first available opportunity. All right, let me go across live exclusively to Omar Abdullah, who is, of course, former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir and President of the National Conference, who was there at the meeting. Omar Abdullah, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Let me just start by asking you a big picture question about what you made of today's meeting. How significant did you think it was, or was it along predictable lines?
Look, Vasu, a meeting with the Prime Minister of India is significant. A meeting with the Prime Minister of India coming in the aftermath of the almost 2 years of disquiet that we've seen in Jammu and Kashmir, and in the presence of such a breakdown of trust that we saw on the 5th of August 2019 is significant in itself. To be honest with you, I didn't go into the meeting with any great expectations. I did go with the view to listen. I wanted to hear what the Prime Minister and what the Government of India had in mind in terms of the roadmap ahead, and to place on record some of our misgivings about what had happened over the last couple of years.
Okay. And was that opportunity allowed? Were people able to share their misgivings and their grievances and concerns?
Yeah, the ones that spoke freely, and you had the various political schools of thought, so to speak. You had the BJP talking from its political standpoint. You had parties like the National Conference and the PDP on a completely different political plane. And then you had some of the other more recent political sort of entrants, who had a slightly different take on things. So it was a mixed bag, as expected. I don't think when the Prime Minister invited all these parties and participants to participate, I don't think he expected everybody to toe the same line.
Sure.
And if they had, I think the meeting would have been a monumental failure. I think it was important for the Prime Minister to hear firsthand what the various points of view are from Jammu and Kashmir.
Okay.
And in all fairness to the Prime Minister, he heard without any interruption. Both he and the Home Minister didn't interrupt at all, and basically allowed those who spoke to speak freely.
Okay, now let's look at some of the sort of outcomes, if you will, of the meeting. At least this is what we're hearing from the government. And let's take each of those one by one. The first, of course, of the significant, one of the significant sort of announcements appears to have been this commitment to restoring statehood. Tell us a little bit about that. What exactly was said, and do you see that as an important first step?
Well, the Home Minister reiterated, as he said, his commitment that was made to Parliament and subsequently as well, and that was again reinforced by the Prime Minister. that Jammu and Kashmir has to be given statehood. The point that some of the people who spoke made was that it has to be complete statehood. It can't be a truncated state.
Right.
It cannot be a state which is further stripped of powers. Jammu and Kashmir will have to be a state like West Bengal is, or like Maharashtra is, or Madhya Pradesh is.
Right.
And one of the points that was made, and made quite forcefully, is that Jammu and Kashmir must have its cadre restored to it. If
Right.
Jammu and Kashmir is a state, then why should its officers come from the UT cadre or any of those other sort of setups? J&K traditionally had a J&K cadre in the IAS and IAPS and elsewhere,
Okay.
and that cadre should be restored.
Okay, so several of you said that emphatically about statehood, that to the government's contention that they will restore it, that it has to be full statehood. Was there any response to the government to that? That they were amenable to that, or they just listened?
No, the government listened. They did talk about statehood, but I think it was important from our point of view to put it across.
Right.
What we understand by statehood, and what we would be willing to accept, and I think it's been made very clear that statehood means statehood, where all the powers that are available to other full-fledged states are available to Jammu and Kashmir. So again, I make the point that it has to be a state like Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh or other states,
Okay,
and
it can't
not
be
a hybrid model. Yeah, not a hybrid model. Look, on the 5th of August 2019, you took decisions which also included removing our cadre. We had a J&K cadre in the IAS, we had a J&K cadre in the IPS. So therefore, if that decision is being reversed and you are taking a union territory and converting it back into a state,
Sure.
then you have to restore our cadre as well.
Okay,
It has
so
to be a
full-
full-fledged state.
Right.
Yeah,
So
a,
full
a
state and-
half-hearted measure will not work.
And what about elections, Omar Abdullah? I mean, was there a sort of general talk of having elections? Was it sort of specifically outlined that elections will happen? And if I can ask an added question, that you had said, and perhaps this may be the view of other leaders as well, that you will not fight elections if Jammu and Kashmir is a union territory. It will only be conditional to statehood being restored.
Look, there was a discussion about elections. Both the Home Minister and the Prime Minister talked about their desire to see elections take place in J&K at the earliest. So from that I understand that it's only a matter of time.
Okay.
So, but Ghulam Nabi Azad Sahab, perhaps expressing a view of a lot of us present there, was that we want statehood restored before elections, not
Right.
after. But again, there was no response from the government on this. As for what my views are, I've already told you that I'm not looking at contesting any assembly elections for the time being, and most certainly not as a union territory.
Okay.
And I see no reason why I should change that.
But let me ask you, Omar, about what I said in my introduction, that there was this highly unusual situation where many of you who were jailed by this very government were derided as Gupkar Gang, are now invited to this meeting. You're standing next, in a sense, to the very leaders who jailed you. A, what was that like? And B, did that come up at all? Was there a chance to ask the government about those detentions?
Well, it did come up. It would be impossible for it not to have come up. I mean, it was brought up by quite a few of the speakers who did speak, and the entire trust deficit between the people of J&K and New Delhi, and the attempt to to drive a wedge between the people of Jammu and Kashmir and the rest of India. All of these things came up. Look, I've never been the sort of person to live in the past.
Okay.
It's not in my nature. So the fact that I was detained for 8 months is, I mean, it's part of my history. It's not going to stop me from doing what I have to do for the people of Jammu and Kashmir going ahead. I think it was important that the sentiment of the people of J&K be put in front of the Prime Minister, and that we disabuse people in power in Delhi of this belief that everyone in Jammu and Kashmir supports what happened on the 5th of August 2019.
Right.
That could not be further from the truth. It would be dishonest on my part to say that there is nobody in J&K who supports it,
Sure.
because obviously there are people who support what happened on the 5th of August.
Right.
But I think it would be wrong for anyone in Delhi to believe that the people of Jammu and Kashmir unanimously endorse what happened on that fateful day, because
Okay.
that's certainly far from the truth.
And what about Article 370? Did that come up? Did several of you get a chance to question that move? And was there any response from the government to that?
It certainly came up, and parties like mine made our position very clear that we have the Constitution gives us the right to challenge decisions of the government, and we are going to use that right that is provided to us by the Constitution to challenge this very decision in the Supreme Court of India. It is unfortunate that the Supreme Court hasn't found time to start hearings in this matter.
Right.
But we are not going to stop. And as some of the participants reminded the Prime Minister that his party waged a campaign almost 7 decades long for the removal of Article 370. So if we have to wage a campaign that is 70 months long or 70 years long or 70 weeks long, however long it is, to have the decisions of the 5th of August 2019 undone, we will do it.
Okay.
But we will do it peacefully, we will do it legally, and we will do it constitutionally.
Okay.
We will not take the law into our own hands, and we won't put people in harm's way to achieve our stated aim.
But you know, the big question, Omar, which has sort of overshadowed this whole process is what happened. You know, we still don't have an explanation about what changed. Why abruptly was this meeting called? Why were all of you who were being attacked so directly by the government invited? Was there any explanation for that? Or if not, what do you make of it?
Look, in all fairness, Vasu, we didn't seek an explanation and one wasn't forthcoming. You don't normally ask your host as to why you're invited. We were there as guests of the Prime Minister at the invitation of the Prime Minister.
Right.
It's for the Prime Minister to know why at this juncture he invited us. Though, in fairness to the Prime Minister, what he did say was that he had actually wanted to have a meeting like this a long time ago.
Okay.
And that he had wanted to follow the DDC elections and the Panchayat elections with a meeting like this.
Right. DDC
but the
is
country
the District
got swept
Development
up
Council.
with COVID.
Right. Yes.
The District Development Council elections, the third tier of local government. But the country got swept up by COVID, and a meeting like this wasn't possible. In fact, he did make the point that this has been the largest in-person meeting that the Prime Minister has had since the onset of COVID last year.
Okay,
so I think that is pretty significant as well.
But Omar Abdullah, fair enough. You may not have, proprieties do not permit people to ask their host, as you said, why did you invite us? But what do you think changed?
I'm not going to speculate, and most certainly not on the record. One of these days when we meet over a cup of coffee, we can shoot the breeze, and I'll tell you what I think, but I have no way of making an informed, categorical opinion, so I'd rather not do that on air.
Okay, very last question. When you were describing the meeting, you said leaders spoke and said A or B. What about you? I mean, are you referring to you? Did you get a chance to speak?
I didn't speak. I didn't speak.
Why is that, if I may ask?
Time ran out.
Okay.
It seems that time ran out. But my father spoke, which is more important. He's the president of the party. I am the vice president.
Okay.
I obviously would not have differed with what my father had to say. That's not to say that I wouldn't have made more points that perhaps he hadn't made.
Sure.
But this is but one meeting in the Prime Minister's stated aim, as he said, Dil ki duri or Dilli ki duri, both have to be reduced, in which case this will not be a one-off meeting. There'll be other meetings, and I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to say my piece at some point or the other. The important thing is that we spoke our minds. We spoke our minds without any reservation and without any fear. And we espoused the views of the people that we represent, and that's all that we can ask for.
No, that's at least an important first step. And you had a chance to say at least some of what you had on your mind tonight, I guess, on just now. So, but here's hoping that we'll finally see some of the unlock that has been going on in Kashmir for so long. But thank you so much indeed, Omar Abdullah, for coming on and spending so much time with us. Thanks very much indeed. Okay, Omar Abdullah there, former Chief Minister, Jammu and Kashmir. Let's now go across to panel patiently listening in. We have Thakur Abhijit Jasrotia, spokesperson BJP, J&K, Head Policy Research Department of the BJP. Suhasini Haider, National Editor and Diplomatic Affairs Editor, The Hindu, is with us. And also Professor Amitabh Mattu, Professor International Relations, JNU. Thank you all for being so patient. Let me just ask you, Thakur Abhijit Jasrotia, that the question that I was trying to ask Omar, maybe you might have a better answer as someone who's in the BJP. What has changed? Why suddenly from saying Gupkar Gang, they're responsible for all that went wrong in Jammu and Kashmir, jailing them, now suddenly inviting them?
See, 2-3 things which I would like to highlight over here. First and foremost of all, Omar Saab is still carrying that thing in his mind that this was the unconstitutional way on which 5th of August 2019 this article was abrogated. But let me remind him one thing, that the way it was imposed on the people of Jammu and Kashmir, Article 370 by a presidential order.
Thakur Saab, sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but that's not my question.
But the way,
my question is, what has happened?
I'm just coming to that also. No, the way it was abrogated, that was the best and the constitutional way, because it was carried in both the houses, and after that it was passed. So still, you.
Okay, now can we come to my question, because time is short. What has changed?
Yeah, the things have changed this way. The things have changed if you will go by the exact comparison of the situation before 2019 and after 2019. The number of stone pelting incidents have gone down drastically. The number of new recruits who used to pick up arms, that has gone down drastically. The killings have also gone down, leaving behind a few incidents like that. Unfortunately,
no, but I'm saying, took place 1 or 2 days back. Are these people? That was the killing of our CID. So in other words, these people, Omar Abdullah, Mehbooba Mufti, these are no longer Gupkar Gang? Is that what you're saying?
See, in this I will have to say that whosoever is there, he is to be called for dialogues, because at the end of the day, dialogue is the solution to any sort of problem.
Okay.
And at this time, Modi ji has really acted like a statesman. He has called everybody on board, because what we have promised to the people of Jammu and Kashmir is a new Kashmir, and new Kashmir is inclusive of all. And the slogan of BJP is
okay. It's still not a clear answer. Let me try if I can get Suhasini to speculate. Suhasini, you wrote a piece where you said one of the factors could be the fact that, amongst other things, there has been a change of regime in Washington, and American pressure could perhaps be a reason.
Well, I don't
as
say
one
American
factor.
pressure, but I wouldn't say American pressure, but I'd certainly say that when we are looking for reasons of why the government decided after 2 years to speak to the very people they have arrested, to speak to the very people that they had derided as the Gupkar Gang, you can't look for, you have to look at the regional situation. And that's very quickly 3 things. One is the situation in Afghanistan, and the US's quick pullout. In fact, it's hastened pullout, which means India does need to deal with a new reality there. The back channel that we understand is going on with Pakistan. There's more flexibility on Jammu and Kashmir is helpful. And India's own situation, a year into the LAC standoff with China, that is made it clear that a two-front situation is something India would have to deal with as a challenge. I think these regional issues are in a sense also part of the government's decision making here.
Sure.
Otherwise, it is hard to understand why a government that was so solidly talking in one direction when it came to political reconciliation, it spoke about bringing a Naya Kashmir polity. We saw foreign diplomats come here and they didn't even meet with these mainstream leaders that Prime Minister Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah met with today. And suddenly they are now being acknowledged as an important part of the Prime Minister's desire for a democratic process ahead. So I do think that you have to look at the regional situation as well.
Okay. Amitabh Mattu, you know, this is what, let's put up this graphic on screen, that recently on the 9th of June there was a congressional hearing on, I think, on Asia generally, and the US Acting Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asia, Dean Thompson, said he's urged the Indian government to return to normalcy in Jammu and Kashmir as quickly as possible. We've seen steps like the release of prisoners and restoring of 4G. There are other electoral steps we'd like to see them take and that we've encouraged them to do and will continue to do so. 2 weeks later, we have this meeting.
Vasu, I wish I could have agreed with Suhasini more robustly, but however, having followed Kashmir for as long as I have and having grown up here, I don't think international pressure works on India, certainly not on Jammu and Kashmir. Let me give you one example. In 1992, you had a weak coalition government of Narasimha Rao. You had an uprising in Kashmir. You had Robin Raphael as the Assistant Secretary of State with a direct access to Bill Clinton, question the accession of Jammu and Kashmir to India. Pressure didn't work. India didn't move an inch on J&K even during the Rao regime.
So then, assuming, let's even if one takes one argument at face value, Amitabh, let me ask you this, because this is what Amit Shah was saying in November 2020. Gupkar Gang is going global. They want foreign forces to intervene in Jammu and Kashmir. The Gupkar Gang insults India's tricolour. Do Sonia ji and Rahul ji support such moves of Gupkar Gang, etc., etc.? And then you have this meeting.
Let me state what I think are the reasons. First of all, I think contrary to what everyone else believes, I think the New Delhi is doing this unilaterally from a position of strength. There's no real discontent expressing itself on the streets of Srinagar or in the valley. The ceasefire is holding on. The separatists are in jail. So there was absolutely, as you said, there is a puzzle there. Why did New Delhi act? One, because if you do so when you're in a position of strength, you can enforce a resolution or an agreement much more easily. Secondly, I think there is a recognition that these leaders who you derided, and that you may have derided for political reasons. Look, this is Indian democratic politics. You abuse each other and then you come back and dine together. But who you may have derided in the past, in the DDC, one second, just let me complete this. In the DDC elections, they did well enough. So you
but listen, the only difference is this, that this is not just a question of derision. These people have been jailed for months on end. And actually for us as a democracy, it's appalling that you locked up mainstream leaders for close to a year or more without any explanation.
Srinivasan, Sheikh Abdullah was jailed for 11 years and then went on and stayed in Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's house in Tunmurti Lane.
That doesn't...
Unfortunately, the burden of Kashmiri history...
No, I know. But the past, sins of the past don't necessarily absolve sins of the present.
I agree with you. I think none of them should be jailed. I think dialogue, dissent, disagreement... you're asking me for what should be a perfect way out, or are you asking me for an explanation? I'm not trying to justify anyone's conduct.
No, I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying you are. But very quickly, Thakur Jasrotia, is it just an acknowledgement by the government at the end of the day that you can call these people Gupkar Gang, etc., but you ultimately have to acknowledge that these are the leaders of Jammu and Kashmir? You can't replace them. I mean, you can jail them as you have for a very long time, but ultimately, who else?
See, I think Professor Amitabh Bhattu has rightly said that the people were detained here for 11 years, and after that, what has happened, everybody knows over here. somewhat this rule is still applicable over here. And I'll say that a problem of 5-6 decades, if it is sorted out by a simple detention of maybe 16 or 18 months, so that is, I think, acceptable to everyone, because the situation was like that. Because abrogation of Article 370 was not a joke. It was really a jolt for everyone. And to come out of such a situation, you needed to take some prophylactic treatment. And that
why detain leaders? I don't understand. On one hand, you say that the abrogation was actually going to solve the problem of the unrest, the militancy, and all of that. If everything was hunky-dory, why detain leaders? Why shut down the longest internet shutdown in the world, Jammu and Kashmir? And by the way, according to the Home Ministry's own figures, you still have leaders who are detained. There are still leaders who are in custody. So
I will have to tell again, the same thing I will have to repeat is this, that it's a problem of 5-6 decades. How can you expect it to be sorted out in just in a single day? It will take some time also. At present also, we are still dealing with the situation, and since everybody is coming on board, both from Jammu and Kashmir. So things are coming up. I think you will see a new Kashmir very soon.
Okay, we've been hearing about a new Kashmir for a long time. But let's see if it finally starts to take shape. Let's just, for starters, let's just release all political, prisoners as a starting point. But anyway, we're out of time. Thank you all so much for joining me on Reality Check. Thanks for watching. Good night.